Two, one.
Here to cover all things crime, history, and politics, we are At the Desk. I'm your host, Massimo Manfra, and in today's episode, we'll be talking about Luigi Mangione and the extensive beginning of Donald Trump's second term. Now, come take a seat with us at the desk. Welcome back to ATD. First, it's time to send it over to the crime panel to discuss Luigi Mangione and the murder of Brian Thompson. Over to you, Cara.
Thanks, Massimo. On December 4th of 2024, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was killed outside of a hotel in New York City. His suspected killer is Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old Maryland native and graduate of UPenn. After being arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, 5 days after the incident, Mangione has become somewhat of a spectacle, gaining mass popularity on platforms such as TikTok and X. People have been showing their support for his supposed crimes and making claims towards his perceived attractiveness as well. His first trial was just held on December 23rd. Experts say his upcoming federal trial could very well end in a jury nullification. It seems the court of public opinion might be stronger than the overwhelming guilty evidence stacked against Mangione. Despite some government officials weighing in on the case and claiming the murder was an act of treason, Mangione's lawyer is determined to protect her client despite her claims at an unfair trial and her possible allegations for terrorism. Okay, so we are back. It's been a minute. Yes.
I know. Good to be back at the table.
It is good to be back. Okay, Eva.
Yes.
Would you like to start us off?
I would love to. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go into his early childhood because he had a very good average life, which I feel like is very different than most criminals we see. So Mangione was born in Towson, Maryland. Towson, hopefully I said that correctly. And his paternal grandfather, Nicholas Mangione, he was actually born poor in a neighborhood of Baltimore. And from there, his grandfather they just started to gain wealth. All of his family became very wealthy. So his cousin is Nino Mangione, and he's actually a member of the Maryland House of Delegates. And his father now runs Mangione Family Enterprises. And then a bunch of his extended family, they run country clubs, valley resorts, health services, a radio station. They are very, very well off.
Yep.
Very,
Money.
yes. So that's awesome for him. We'll see. It was awesome. Okay, so Mangione, he then attended Gilman School, which is an all private school for all boys. And he actually graduated as valedictorian in 2016. So obviously very smart. And he also reportedly wrestled and played soccer while he was a student there. So just very well-rounded person. He was involved in a lot of things. He was also the captain of the school's robotic team. And then he went on to receive a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and Computer Engineering and a Master of Science in Engineering in Computer Information Science, along with a minor in mathematics.
Wow.
None other
There's
than...
no way you memorized that. Yeah,
No, I
okay,
had to type that out. Try saying that 10 times fast. You can.
Don't even remember it.
No, I couldn't even tell you right now.
Wow.
At Penn, which is obviously an Ivy League school.
Very
impressive. Very prestigious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let alone all of those very difficult majors. So very, very smart. Very on top of it. He graduated in 2020. His graduate curriculum was also concentrated in artificial intelligence. He was very into technology.
It was
like a big thing for him. He thought technology was going to change the world. Big study for him. He also founded a video game development club. Just the resume goes on and on. He was very stacked. He was awesome at the time. And he also joined a fraternity. He was a member of Phi Kappa Psi.
Okay.
So he was just such a well-rounded student. I mean, literally checked off every box, everything you could ask for.
It seems like it.
A future employer's dream candidate right there. So yeah, he was very, very involved. And kind of from there, he began to work remotely as a data engineer for TrueCar in California. It was stated that his employment kind of ended around 2023 there. And then his last known location or residence before this whole situation occurred was in Hawaii. So kind of all over the map. But overall, I feel like with his growing up in his childhood, just very he was just really well-rounded, very good. And I feel like that's very different than a lot of people we see commit crimes are. You know, a lot of people we've talked about on this panel, you know, they come from a bad background. Maybe
Absolutely.
they have abusive parents. Maybe they just had a lot of hard struggles in their life. Kind of, that's, I guess, what kind of, you know, makes their mind kind of work in those maybe more sick, twisted ways. But he honestly could not name a single thing. I mean, he was so involved. He was in sports. He seemed to be popular, had a good social life. I mean, very, very intelligent, very smart, knew what he was doing. So he kind of just checked all the boxes. So it's very kind of a different contrast to what we see with normal criminals. So very interesting.
Yeah. Circling back to what you said about living in Hawaii, correct? I want to throw it over to you, Sophia.
Yeah.
I know that you have some
Yes.
notes about that and about surfing as well. How does that tie into
so
everything?
another huge aspect of this case that's been highlighted in the media is Luigi's mental and physical health. So multiple Reddit posts from Luigi have resurfaced that included details about a spinal condition that he had. This condition occurs when a fracture causes a vertebrae to slip out of alignment. So his back pain allegedly worsened as time went on, especially when he was living in Hawaii, where he suffered from a surfing accident.
Yes.
Friends from this time period said that the challenges brought on by his physical pain began affecting his mental health as well. And he was unable to participate in recreational activities and exercises. And in 2023, he actually had surgery to remedy his pain, which, according to his social media post, worked. His social media post also showed that he even went on a backpacking trip through Asia after his surgery. However, he still showed signs of depression, such as isolation. There's a lot of evidence that shows how Luigi was withdrawing from his close relationships. For example, posts on X show friends who were trying to get in touch with Luigi, but there was no success. He last communicated with his mom in July of 2024. After months passed, she decided to hire a private investigator to get more information. However, when this search led nowhere, his parents decided to report him missing in November. So then a month later, he was arrested.
My goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
A lot.
a lot to unpack there, especially as a parent having to report your child missing. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
especially
sure
like
that
they
was,
haven't spoken since July and November. They had to
In
report them
that's-
missing. Like, that's crazy.
I think that's definitely a sign that something else was probably going on, that
Definitely.
something else was wrong. Yeah, Ryan?
Yeah,
What do you think?
I just fell out of a coconut tree, as Kamala Harris said. I appeared on scene 5 minutes ago and was told I had the gig. So why don't I decide? Let's talk about.
Yes.
We can talk about rather law enforcement's response. I know a little bit about that. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll talk about
absolutely.
that. So the whole question. So first of all, it was found in Altoona, Pennsylvania, by a law enforcement officer who was on the job for way less than a year. I don't know the exact amount of time. It was 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6 months. New cop showed up to the McDonald's, asked all the right questions. He asked if he's been to New York City recently, read the right body movements out of Luigi, and eventually deciphered the situation and found out that this could very much be a suspect. Days later, the NYC is blaring with sirens down Route 80 all the way to Altoona. Actually, they probably drove by State College, as a matter of fact. It's pretty
Yes.
cool.
Yeah.
Once
Right
they
here.
got onto 99. Once they got there, they started the investigation. The FBI got involved too because he crossed state lines. He does have some charges in Pennsylvania. Those are a bit of a mess right now. But in New York, he is looking at, of course, one charge using a firearm to commit murder. So with that being said, he's also potentially looking at federal charges of an attempted assassination, which is also up in the air. Because of all these different jurisdiction crossings, the way New York City handled it with the stage walk back into the courthouse, it's looking like you could very possibly see jury nullification, mixing up my R's and L's there. Anyway, jury nullification would basically mean for the betterment of our Constitution, because that everyone deserves the right to a fair trial, they would have to throw out the case. But here's what I find interesting. Donald Trump was also charged in New York. He did not have jury nullification. How could you say you don't know Donald Trump or have a political stance towards Donald Trump? How could you say you don't? So with that being said, it's the same thing with Luigi. If they didn't throw out Trump's case in New York, why are they going to throw out Luigi's case in New York? That's my question that I'm going to ask the New York Court of Appeals to consider.
Yes. I know that before also we kind of spoke about some things about how actually the support for the supposed crime has been connecting a lot of people for, and I know it seems like an interesting word to use, but it's true. I mean, you have people on both sides of the political spectrum actually saying that if this is true, that they support his actions and they support kind of the sense of protest that he had in this murder, because I read somewhere the perspective is that healthcare is an American issue. It's not a political issue. What do we think about that?
Yeah.
I mean, that goes to public health care, which is very complicated. Do we want to talk about
Yeah, I
that?
don't know if we have the time to talk about that
Complicated.
today.
No,
Yes.
but I mean, I think it's very interesting. I mean, I've seen so many posts that are calling him a hero. People
Yes.
are making GoFundMe pages to support him. And I think that's I
pay
mean,
his legal fees and
right.
stuff
They're like,
like
let's
that.
help him out. Let's pay for him. I mean,
Yes.
people are just raving about him online. It's
Mhm.
very mixed reactions. Of course, like you said in your intro, calling him attractive, calling him like, oh, making edits. You know,
That I think has definitely been one of
Crazy.
the head turners of this
100%.
case.
And even we were just sitting here right before this panel started, and we were sitting here talking about, some things about Luigi and just even
Mhm.
like the wording we use when we talk about him and the way like kind of like, we kind of make jokes or like our facial expressions. And I'm like, okay, like if he was a 50-year-old old man
Yep.
who's balding, not maybe the cutest, I feel like we wouldn't be using these terms.
Mhm.
I feel like it's definitely because of, I want to say his attractiveness. But,
I mean,
he's young. He's,
yeah, pretty privileged.
Pretty privileged.
It's up for debate if we think it's
That confuses
Yeah.
me too. Is why is
Yes.
this super uber talented smart man with all this money and political connections
Mhm.
to, by the way, a party that ironically is connected to this, have the motivation to kill someone? Was it for the benefit of society? That's what confuses me.
I 100% agree.
And this case is exploited on social media, and it really shows the power of when this case does go to trial, it's going to show the power of empathy versus evidence.
Mhm.
And it's like, we're concerned about jury nullification, as Ryan mentioned. It's like Mangione might be acquitted even if there is compelling evidence against him. And that is because of the social media power. And like I said, empathy versus the evidence. What are they really going to prioritize?
Well, I think you also have to blame Mayor Adams there for the jury nullification on that one. He's having problems of his own.
yes.
That's a whole other story. But the point of the matter is that the FBI is going after him. Trump might pardon him, but obviously he hasn't yet. So the cases are still there. When this happened, Biden was president. Biden wasn't going to pardon him. And with that being said, with the whole case scenario there, the way they treated Luigi Mangione coming back to New York, having this one guy in cuffs, almost like in shackles, like he looked like he was walking into a slave ship. He was surrounded by like 30 or 40 armed police officers. This guy does not have a gun on him at that moment. He also is shorter than just about every single person around him. The mayor was there. It was just an average arrest. Like, I just didn't understand why they needed to do that. It wasn't like they were carrying Godzilla to prison. They were carrying,
It's a
a
very
guy.
big spectacle.
They
It's
were
like,
carrying an
whoa.
unarmed guy in shackles, and they had helicopters behind him, and that's where jury nullification came in. So, in part, you can blame Eric Adams for trying to divert attention away from him, and that again is politics.
Yeah, that is true. It's okay. We can sprinkle it in here and there. We know you're on both. We love you for it. Yeah.
Oh,
He loves
thank
to-
you.
Of
Of course.
He loves to combine.
I think it definitely is going back to what Eva said. I really do. I know that specifically, something again I've seen in the media is people have been comparing his likeness to Dave Franco and are saying, is this going to be the next season of Monsters with Ryan Murphy? And I know that honestly, I think if you look at the Menendez case in this one, there's a lot of some similarities there about it kind of turning into a spectacle and, kind of both involving more, we'll say, easier looking on the eyes, young men and things like that. And I think that definitely it influences people's perceptions of, these crimes and these criminals. I think that is definitely at play here, 100%.
Right. And I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't think any crime should be glorified. I don't think, if you do something wrong, if you harm another individual, even if you don't agree with their policies or what they have to say, taking someone's father away from them and taking a human life, I think, is unexcusable. But yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of things at play that kind of contribute to people's mixed reactions.
We're actually seeing almost zero effect because now Trump is cutting Medicare and Medicaid costs in certain states, making it tougher to get. With all that being said, basically we're going in the opposite direction of what a lot of people were hoping out of this murder.
Yes, which I think is definitely interesting, but that is all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you so much.
That's quick.
Luigi Mangione is currently being held without bail in New York's Brooklyn Metropolitan Detention Center. He will face his 20 federal counts in a trial set to take place on February 21st. The prosecution claims that as they have gathered evidence for this trial, they have found a positive ID for a fingerprint match that puts Mangione at the crime scene. A fake ID and a legal firearm found on Mangione during his arrest will also be included in the evidence as well. For now, we'll just have to wait and see how persuasive Mangione's supporters are while he still works very hard to maintain his innocence. Back to you, Massimo.
Thanks, Cara. Today, stay tuned for our politics panel as they discuss Donald Trump's first moves back in office. In the meantime, please enjoy some previous content by our own Emily Koza on the city of Bellefonte and its connection to the Underground Railroad. We'll be right back at the desk.
The Underground Railroad was the network of people, Black, white, Native American, wealthy, and poor, men and women, who assisted African Americans escape the institution of slavery in the 19th century. There are many different towns and places that were used to get freed slaves up north. One of the most significant places in Pennsylvania is right here, 20 minutes from State College in Bellefonte. I have the privilege of being here today in a town full of history regarding the Underground Railroad. Bellefonte played a crucial role in the Underground Railroad. They were one of the first towns in America where slavery was forbidden. Due to the early anti-slavery movement taking place here, this became a home for former slaves and freemen. Bellefonte has so much history that it has a whole self-guided tour, which I will be walking you through here at the desk on the road. The first stop on the tour is here at the Bellefonte Museum of Art. Built in 1810, the museum was originally known as the Lynn House. The Lynn House was once a residential property that served as a home to several prominent residents. Both Mary Benner Wilson and Jacob Valentine Thomas are believed to have been active in the Underground Railroad. Making this claim credible is the existence of a hidden crawl space located on the third floor of the house. The compartment allegedly was used to conceal escaped slaves that were en route to Canada. There is a year-round virtual exhibit here at the museum for the Underground Railroad. Our second stop is here at the Samuel Harris House. The home was built in around 1830 for Samuel Harris, a cabinet maker, and his wife Nancy, who were two prominent allies in the Underground Railroad. And similarly to the Lynn House, there is also a hidden room on the third floor of the house that was believed to help hide the people that were trying to escape to freedom. You can still visit the Harris House and the secret room today. Next stop on the tour is the courthouse area, featuring a statue of Andrew Curtin. The story of Curtin and Henry Thomas highlights Bellefonte's role in aiding freedom seekers. After escaping slavery in Maryland and Virginia, Thomas worked at the Pennsylvania Hotel, now the Brockerhoff House, in 1856. When two disguised Southern agents sought his help, he unknowingly insisted in his own abduction under the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. Andrew Curtin, a local lawyer and future governor of Pennsylvania, learned of Thomas's situation and quickly gathered a posse to pursue him and the kidnappers. Although they failed to rescue Thomas, the incident illustrates the dangers of slavery even in a safe community. Curtin's actions reflect his character as he later supported the Union during the Civil War. This story is documented in the writings of William H. Mills, a barber in the 1870s. Now we're here at the Governor's Pub, formerly called the Mills Barber Shop. William H. Mills ran a barbershop near the current Governor's Pub and significantly contributed to Bellefonte's Underground Railroad history. Born in 1847, he learned barbering and then opened his own shop in 1871. He notably cut Frederick Douglass's hair during his speaking tour in 1872. An active member of the AME Church, Mills helped establish the local Masonic Lodge and worked to desegregate Bellefonte schools in 1885. He also sang with local Jubilee singers, a tradition continued by his grandchildren, who formed the famous jazz pop group, the Mills Brothers, inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 1998. Our next stop is here at the St. Paul Church. The church, established in 1859, served as a cultural hub for the Black community. The original church burned down in 1909, and the current structure behind me was built in 1910. William H. Mills, a secretary and preacher, documented the church's history.
We are once again back at the desk. It's time to send it over to our politics panel to discuss Donald Trump's recent moves. Over to you, Yaya.
Thanks, Massimo. If you're anything like me, you have your AP News notifications on. And if you do, you've also been bombarded by notifications of all the executive orders President Trump has signed since retaking his place in the Oval Office. They say the first 100 days of a new administration are always busy, and the 47th president is certainly surpassing that expectation. Ryan, can you start us off by telling us what exactly an executive order is?
Me, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, we
And
have
they-
2 Ryans on one side. That's a recipe for disaster.
No. We're good friends. We get along well. Don't worry. Anyway, an executive order is not, and let me put this way, it is not law. Law is legislation, and legislation comes from Congress. An executive order is quite literally, and yes, I'm going to answer it literally, an order from the executive office holder, the President of the United States. Now, with that being said, I have examples of executive orders, like, for example, the Emancipation Proclamation by Abraham Lincoln, which declared that the U.S. government recognizes enslaved individuals as equal citizens, that being passed, obviously, during the Civil War. And then Trump has quite a popular bunch of executive orders that he ran on, like the Two Sexes Order, mandating that all bureaucratic agencies like the DOJ, FBI, the U.S. military, the EPA, etc., all only recognize two sexes. That is one of the many controversial orders that he's had. And these, again, are not law. They are not required to be followed by individuals, but on papers and different federal employees must adhere to this as a rule, which is what an executive order is. Can I explain it any more direct?
No, but I really thank you for giving us that explanation, because in conversations that I've had with people who may not be as invested in politics, they see these kind of headlines of like, oh, the two sexes, DEI is going away, federal aid is going away, and there's this kind of
Paperwork and guidance.
there's
Just
this-
paperwork
there's
and
this
guidance.
missing piece of the difference between an executive order and actual legislation. So I think
Mhm.
it's really important for people to understand.
And then I have
what
another
this
thing to
is.
point out too,
Yeah, please do.
especially with the two sexes one specifically. States are not required to follow federal executive orders in most case scenarios. So, for example, in the state of New Jersey, which is a Democratic legislation and has Democratic executive orders through its Democratic governor, you may see more than two sexes on paperwork, which is one thing to note as well. So this really isn't law, and it's very rare that you're going to get punished for an executive order in the court of law.
Yes.
But and I think the thing that you kind of mentioned that was interesting is you're seeing these headlines, you're seeing these things, and people are getting concerned. What does this mean? What's this going to do?
Mhm.
I think that's the point. I think these headlines are to showcase this is what's going on, this is what's being talked about. And I think the point of that also is like that kind of creates that buzz around it. So
Mhm.
even though it's not necessarily something that, you know, has to be followed in every single state,
Mhm.
it starts that conversation. And I think that's the goal. The goal is to start the conversation. The goal is to make people aware of what people might want to get done.
And you know what you just reminded me that is another good example is
Mm-hmm.
the whole Gulf of America thing.
Yeah.
He is mandating, it's not a law, but he is mandating that different agencies
Mhm.
recognize the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America, and that there is now a Mount McKinley as well, which is very interesting.
And again,
Try not
all
to
to get
smile.
the buzz. All to get the buzz. You
Yeah.
want people talking about this because that's good for the administration.
Yeah, Jackson, I want to ask you, what's your first impression of all of this flurry of executive orders that Trump is signing? Like, how are you feeling right
It
now?
is literally exactly what I expected. He's promised immediate action. He's taken it. I mean, there are some things I don't approve of, like, for example, pardoning every single January 6th rioter. But again, he said he was going to do it, and now he's done it. So, and you know, the Gulf of America thing, that wasn't something he campaigned on, but it's something that kind of pushes his general, very conservative, like kind of nationalistic agenda of like, you know, we're the better country between us and Mexico. We deserve to have that body of water named after us. So does it really do anything in practicality? No, but it sets a precedent of, yeah, we are the best country around here. We deserve that body of water. And that's why the executive orders come into play. It's like kind of setting the Overton window a little more to the right. It doesn't have any real power, like you said. It's not a legislative action, but it's something just kind of like normalizes something that wasn't normal beforehand.
It's rules, it's code for agencies.
Yeah.
I want to talk
It's
about the
bureaucratic
whole
mandate.
Gulf of America, the Canada being the 51st state, buying Greenland. I want to talk about that in a second. I want to ask our good friend Ryan Patterson,
Well, I was hoping to kind of talk about that
how are
too.
you feeling?
Personally, I think that the whole Greenland thing, the Canada becoming a state thing, which is ridiculous because Republicans would never win an election again if Canada became
That would be a big state.
I think they talked about dividing it into two, which I still don't think is
Be two big states.
They ought to do like five.
But I think
Five big states.
Yes.
All those
Not going to
provinces.
change much.
all these big like headline grabbers that are causing all this attention. I think it really just serves as a distraction while the Trump administration gets down and does the dirty work, like clearing out the Justice Department, or mass deportation starting, trying to figure out how to build an Iron Dome, which Donald Trump has recently talked about a lot.
I want to ask, do you think, and I'm going to ask Ryan P. to start, but I'm posing the question to all of you guys. Do you think that this momentum is going to slow down after we reach past the 100-day mark? Do you think it's going to keep going? Because oftentimes you see, especially given that this is his second term, he already has experience with the presidency. He kind of knows more what he's doing. So do you think he's going to just keep pushing these executive orders out? Or do you think it's just kind of, he's back in power, for a little bit. The attention is on the White House right now. And then once things kind of die down, do you think he's going to step back and just kind of be more chill? Like, what are I know it's early, but what are our projections
I personally think
right
he will
now?
not slow down because he has no more campaigns to run. He
Yeah.
kind of just is in a position now where he knows he has 4 years to do
I don't know
whatever
about
he
it.
wants.
There is some legislation being passed.
That's not going to happen, Ryan.
It's not going to happen, but it's out there.
He might want it
out
to
there.
happen, but it's not going to happen.
He wants
There might
it
be
to happen,
Republicans,
but
maybe
it's
some
out there.
Democrats who want a
Mhm.
president to run for a third term because we could get a Trump-Obama rematch. Not a rematch, but a Trump-Obama matchup, which would be something.
Obama.
But yes, no, Trump will not run for a third term. But yes, he's only has one more term to run, and that's why he wants to do whatever he wants to, as much as he wants to.
I do agree with Jackson here. I'm believing in our democracy. I'm believing that it's going to work the way it's been
Mhm.
working for all these years. He can't run for re-election, and after the Supreme Court granted presidents expansive immunity, he really has nothing to restrain him anymore. He's got one term left. Pretty much, he's fair game to do what he pleases, and I don't think that's going to stop. I think he's going to take these next 4 years and he's going to run with it, and he's going to keep going and doing everything that he possibly can before he's out of office.
I think this 4 years, I agree with you too that I don't think he's going to stop. I think this 4 years, it's very different from the first four. The first four, he had a lot of establishment Republicans around him, moderate Republicans that were more willing to fight back. 2017, there was the whole resistance movement by the Democrats. You don't really see that now. You see Republicans in Congress falling in line. I mean, Hegseth passed with ease in any other security administration type of thing. He would absolutely not go through with that. Trump is surrounded by people who just show blind loyalty to him, and I think as long as that is the case, he will keep pushing out orders just like the ones he's been doing.
Anyone want some facts? I love
I love when Ryan talks
We love
facts.
facts.
We
Okay,
love Ryan
guess who
Bobby's
has
facts.
more executive orders in their back pocket? Trump or Biden?
Biden.
Nope, Trump.
Trump, really?
220 to 162, according to USA Facts.
Oh, wow.
I love
Interesting to know.
it.
You
Look
know
at
who
that.
has the most amount of executive orders? I'll give you a hint. He served more than 2 terms.
So more than, FDR, well.
Yes,
Yeah.
FDR, 3,721 executive
Well, when you
orders.
get that
Well, I
many
mean,
years
that
in the
makes
White
sense.
House, I mean, what are
Let's-
you going to do? Especially wartime.
Let's
I mean,
put it in
yes.
context, right? Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. But I think what's so interesting, going back to this whole talk about buying Greenland, making Canada the 51st state, I am inclined to agree with Ryan P. I hope our viewers can Ryan L. Ryan P. Let's do that.
We're not going to sit next to each other next time. Don't worry. It won't be confusing.
But I think it's so interesting how people are very focused on the rhetoric behind what he's saying. Like, this is the type of stuff that makes headlines. But like Ryan P. said, it's not the stuff of substance, you
Mhm.
know? So I think it's a very good strategy that he has, because Greenland's not going to be bought. This is not, there's no more Louisiana purchases happening in our lifetime. You know what I'm saying?
You never know. We're seeing a lot of
So,
interesting things happen that we
I
never
really
thought.
just don't think, and even Denmark shot back, they were like, that's just not going to
Yeah.
happen.
Did you read that Trump Term 3 legislation piece that was
I
passed?
did. You know what? I
Interesting.
actually had to read it like 5 times because I didn't understand what it was
Mhm.
saying at first. But they were saying that a president cannot run for no more than 3 terms and no more than 2 consecutive terms.
Mhm.
The wording of that was very, very confusing, which is why I don't think it'll hold up anywhere. And I have faith in our democracy that people would just not want to break like 400 years
Yeah.
of precedence of just
Mhm.
having 2 terms. Besides FDR, if you break out into war, God
That's a different
forbid,
story.
then
It's
that's
just
a
like-
different
it's just
story.
like
But
Vladimir
just like
Zelensky.
exactly,
Yeah.
but just like different. No, just if things run as normal, I don't think that will hold up. But
Mhm.
I think he's very good at utilizing the spotlight to get things out there so that
Mhm.
what's really happening on the ground kind of passes unnoticed.
Well, and I think you both made actually really interesting points. The sensationalization of everything that's happening.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of the point. That's what they're going for. Let's throw these crazy things out there, because then, anything that happens that's not crazy, like buying Greenland, sorry. Or, Canada's 51st state, well, it seems a little bit tame. And kind of what you mentioned about, we're seeing a lot of extremism as well. Polarization is something we've talked about on the show many, many times. And it's something that we're going to keep talking about because that's where we're at. Lots of extremes. And I think the thing I want to see again from this administration, can we find a way back to a middle ground? Can we find Democrats and Republicans getting along? Can we stop with the crazy extremes and just try to find a path forward that everyone can on board
This
with?
administration, though, I feel is the reason we have this polarization right now. I think the rhetoric that he introduced in 2016 when he started to run really changed politics forever. And honestly, I want to talk about a little bit about the federal grants he decided to block today that
Yeah.
affects elementary school, or no, not even just elementary school, schooling, colleges, healthcare. Medicaid was having trouble all day today. These are all things that Democrats should look at this and start screaming like, he blocked Medicaid. He did this. Look at all these things he's doing now.
But a federal judge did block that order, though.
A federal judge did block the order, but
yeah.
Still, the fact that he's willing to try something like that is really concerning.
Trump likes to shake the bureaucracy. That's like the theme of this term. He wants to He wants to shake up the deep state. He wants it to be controversial. He wants it on the news with him, and he wants it to be loyal to him.
Jackson, I want to know what you have to hear about that, specifically Ryan P's comment about Donald Trump kind of being at the core cause of this polarization that we're seeing, because it's kind of unprecedented.
Well, I think the polarization is more so rooted in the media coverage of Trump. I know he says some things that are controversial. Yes, he's Donald Trump. He's been that way his entire life. But I think the way the media has covered him, portraying him as Hitler, portraying him as this and that, has been kind of the thing that's really driven the division within the country around him, especially. But as far as him blocking Medicaid, I think Trump has been in government for long enough now to where he knows that wouldn't last. But again, he's doing it for sensationalism and trying to mess with the bureaucracy, for other words.
It's
directly hurt people.
Well, not directly, though, because
actions will
but it immediately got blocked, though, like you said, though. So it's not actually going to happen.
It looked scary for a while.
Yes, but that's the thing, though. That's the point, though, is to scare the system. That is why he does what he does.
I think intention matters. I think intention matters. I don't intend to hurt somebody, but you have to own up and you have to take accountability for that. So the intention of doing things that might be tearing apart families or hurting people or blocking people from getting the care that they need, whether or not you think it's going to go through, the intention of starting that conversation can be something that it can be a little upsetting to see.
And you have to question the intention of, like Ryan said, like Jackson has said, to scare the system, to shake up the bureaucracy. I'm questioning how productive that is for the country, because like you said, Trump probably knew that it was not going to last. It was not going to go in the direction that he wanted it to go. So if he's not doing that with the full belief that it's actually going to change something, and he's only doing it to scare people, a scare tactic, this is going into dangerous territory. I personally don't, it's giving petty, and I don't think I want to have a president that is doing things for petty reasons just to show like, hey, this is how I feel. I don't like this, so I'm going to scare you guys a little bit.
I mean, that's what he's doing. He's clearing out the deep state to fill nonpartisan officials with people that are loyal to him.
So I want to, great point, Ryan P. I want to get into now kind of the meat of these executive orders. Let's start with immigration. My father actually sent me a message yesterday. It was forwarded from his boss, and it was a woman who was working, my dad works for the World Bank, a woman who was in the World Bank in telecommunications from Colombia. And she was relocated to DC. And as soon as she set foot in DC, she was held by airport authorities, and her G4 visa was taken away. We're seeing a lot of crackdowns now. There's rumors, and I would like to clarify that these are only rumors, that ICE was actually spotted in, or has actually been conducting raids in Centre County. Again, these are only rumors. We don't have...
I believe it's confirmed that they were seen in Centre County. It's not confirmed if any arrests were made.
Exactly. So there's, I want to say, a heightened sense of fear now that people are going to be getting deported. I think it's very interesting because we've seen, this might change, but compared to Biden, Trump, and Obama had the most deportations in his term. This might change now that we have Trump. But I want to talk about kind of this fear surrounding people getting deported now for seemingly baseless reasons, and then how Trump has been justifying those.
Well, the reasoning behind, yes, let's go for it. Wait, do you want to say something to say, Ryan?
Sorry?
You have something you want to say, Ryan? Yeah, you made a hand motion.
Oh, no, we have videos in the background. I was waiting for them to play. Sorry, pardon me. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll get into those soon.
Yes, I was about to say. Yes, so the immigration policy. So this, again, a very big campaign promise of his. He promised mass deportations. He promised that every single illegal immigrant will be deported. But the strategy is to go after the violent criminals first. That's what Tom Homan has said, and that's what he has said. So right now, the ICE raids are being done on people who have been convicted of felonies and convicted of violent crimes specifically, to get them out of the country back to where whatever country they came from. Specifically Colombia. There were a lot, I think we had like 900 or something coming from Colombia, and they were sent back. And obviously the president of Colombia was rejecting it at first, and then Trump threatened tariffs.
Now that is the art of the deal. That reminds me of Donald Trump's book. That is actually one of the reasons why sometimes it works out to have a businessman in a high position like that in our
Yes.
government. Is because they don't settle on things necessarily the way they're put at you face value. They work, they find other solutions. And the Trump administration did actually happen to do that. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with the whole idea around deporting people, but I'm saying that the way Trump handled that was actually very unique to the average politician. And that was very interesting.
I
Yes.
can't speak to Trump's intentions. All I'm going to say is I don't think that somebody who works at the World Bank and holds a G4 visa can be considered a violent criminal. So I'm wondering if there's a disconnect between
Yeah.
the intention and the actual operationalization of what's going
Mhm.
on. I do
Well-
want to get into tariffs really quick because we can connect Colombia. Oh, Jordan, you
I'll
say
say-
what you want to say first,
Yes, I
and then we'll
did
get
the
into
connection,
tariffs.
yes.
I have a quick thought on that though. Whenever it comes to deportations, the thing that always gets me is that also kind of goes hand in hand with humanity. And I think the problem that sometimes we see in these cases is that the humanity isn't always there. And at the end of the day, it's people, and we need to treat them with respect. And we need to be kind. We need to try to keep families together. And I think that's maybe the concern surrounding some of these mass deportations that are going on right now. Families are being split up, and we're just lacking that humanity right now. And that's, I think, something that I would love to see
More of.
more
But
of.
that is something that we've always had a problem with.
Well,
in the
yeah, this
United
is
States.
nothing new.
That is not a dupe for Donald Trump. That is not pushing and pressing on Obama or Biden. That has been a problem we've had since the dawn of our southern border crisis.
And that's why I feel like the need to keep bringing it up. Humanity and
Mhm.
deportations
Right.
don't go hand in hand, and maybe they should.
People over politics.
Mhm.
Is
People
what
over
we're getting
politics.
into. So Jackson mentioned the I don't want to say beef, that kind of sounds a little reductionist, but the issues, the tension between the Colombian president and Donald Trump. And the Colombian president is not the only world leader that Trump has had issues with, not even
Claudia
internationally,
Sheinbaum.
even just in our own country. And one of the reasons that there's been so much tension between Donald Trump and these other leaders is tariffs. So America is about to enact tariff plans, and Donald Trump was very adamant about his tariff plans going into effect this February.
Which will only
Here's-
raise prices for a bit.
Exactly.
Sorry.
But here is his message to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're
No,
bringing
Jackson,
it
I
down
didn't
very
mean to. I
substantially,
wasn't like
even
pointing to
from
you.
the
I was
original
just telling her
Trump
we got
tax
it. Like I was
cuts.
like giving you something.
But if you
Yeah, I was
don't
hoping
make
you
your
guys had a
product in
couple.
America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt. Under the Trump administration, there will be no better place on earth to create jobs, build factories, or grow a company than right here in the good old USA.
Right. So America first. This has been the underlying logic in Trump's plans to enact tariffs. People are on both sides of it. Some people think it's going to be good for the American consumers. Another faction of people think it's not going to be good for the American consumers. Ryan P. You are very
You've
fired.
been skipping over me all day.
No, Ryan, you know I love you, but you know he's
Aw.
very passionate about this. We'll do Ryan P and then Ryan L.
Thank you.
Don't want to make anyone mad.
Well,
Aw.
like I said before we cut away, interrupting. Yeah, sorry about that. Tariffs are only going to raise prices for American consumers, and prices are already up. They're still up. Trump promised to tackle them. Then he says he's not really sure if he's able to tackle them, but only increasing tariffs on things to countries like China, Colombia, etc., is only going to A, make relations worse, and B, make prices worse for Americans.
It is tension. He's right. It is tension. And research has actually found that when you impose tariffs just like this, certain prices are going to go up, not just for foreign things, but for domestic things as well. Because when the foreign things go up, the domestic things slowly follow and still stay a little cheaper, still moving up there.
Well, and one of the things I thought was interesting about this idea of tariffs, it was quoted that Trump liked tariffs that were imposed during William McKinley's presidency, and the idea that it helps fund the government. I thought it was interesting that at Dartmouth, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Dartmouth College economist Douglas Irwin, and he noted this on X, but he said that there was a little something called the Panic of 1893, and that unemployment rates was in double digits from 1894 to 98, not a great decade. So learning from the past, it can be tricky. It can cause problems, kind of like you both were saying. There's a lot that kind of goes into the idea of tariffs. And I think that's the thing where, in theory, it's an idea to help fund the government, but in actual practice, it might not exactly translate.
Yeah, Jackson.
Well, that's not the end goal of a tariff. The end goal of a tariff is to move jobs to the United States and make more manufacturing in the United States.
And to make things cheaper too.
Yes, in the long run. Short term,
Ideally.
you were right. Yes, prices will raise because the prices will go up on foreign-made goods from China, from Colombia, wherever else.
Well, as the
Canada,
foreign goods get taxed,
Mexico.
the domestic goods are going to still go up as well in price. They're going to
Slowly.
stay a little
Yes.
cheaper because
Yes.
when you sell something for $20, the person's going to be like, I'm still winning if I sell it for $19.25.
Yes, but those car manufacturers that are having the tariffs imposed on them will be more and more encouraged to come to America and build plants here and sell to American consumers from the United States, and that is the end goal of the tariff.
That is the idea.
Trump wants to get the United States about as not as isolationist, but about as independent as possible from other countries. Because right now, China's ripping us off, Canada's ripping us off. All these other countries are ripping the United States off, and they've been doing it for 30 years now. So the question becomes: would you rather fight a trade war or be on the receiving end of a trade genocide? That's my term for it.
Okay.
I say trade genocide. When the other country is tariffing you on massive numbers and you're not, you're being genocided in trade. And that is what Trump has been pushing.
That's a strong word. We also have to talk about the economic concept of comparative advantage. The United States has a comparative advantage in things like tech, in things like human capital. Places like China and Canada, they might have comparative advantage in other things, China specifically in manufacturing cars and things like that. So that's where also those domestic prices come in, raising when we have tariffs imposed, because the United States comparatively does not produce these things as effectively as other countries might. And that's why economists are so worried, because in a world where we're increasingly interdependent on each other, having this kind of almost isolationist policy is going to cause a ripple effect all over the world. And I'm understanding
It's how China sunk all those years ago, if you remember that too.
exactly. So I'm understanding the America First policy, and I'm understanding wanting to bring back jobs to Americans. But at the same time, that might have worked a couple decades ago,
Yeah.
but we're in a world where everything is interdependent. The 2008 economic crisis had ripple effects all over the world, and people are still feeling it today, even outside of the United States. So withdrawing such a huge economic power from the world trade system is going to have consequences that we can't even predict yet. Whether or not those are good or bad, we have yet to see.
Well, and I think you make a good point, because there's a balance between nationalism and globalism. Yes, it makes sense that, we want to bring jobs back to America. We want to make sure employment is up, but kind of like you're saying, we're in this system. We're all connected with the countries all over the world, all over the globe. How do you find that balance between keeping those relationships tight, keeping the world economy working, while also putting America first, per se?
It's negotiating. That's what it comes down to, negotiating. And if Trump's tariffs cause other countries to say, okay, well, we're going to start putting more tariffs on you when it comes to war, then maybe there could be a point where he could negotiate with world leaders, maybe take some tariffs off each way. So that way it's at least fair. Trump just wants fair trade between the United States and other countries like China, like everywhere else, and he wants the United States to not be ripped off, because they've been being ripped off for many years now. That's his end goal with these moves.
Well, we'll see how that goes. We're going to give. Well, Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, good. I was just going to say, in terms of what I was talking about with Colombia too, Donald Trump's unique approach has produced results, but we'll see if those results produce to the American people too.
Let's hope, yes.
Well, we're going to give the last word to dear old 47. Donald Trump met with officials in Los Angeles, California last week to discuss federal aid and the state of FEMA. Let's take a look at his conversation with LA Mayor Karen Bass.
No, that will not be the case.
Okay, I just hope
That
you're
will
right.
not, you can hold me to it.
There's 4 groups said that. and
No,
That would be, they should
No,
be able to
that-
do it. They should be able to start tonight.
that will not be the case. First we have to take care to make sure that there's not getting rid of the hazardous waste, cleaning things up so that people can start right away. And just like you said, if somebody had their house was destroyed and they're going to rebuild essentially the same, maybe a little bit longer, a little bit higher, they really shouldn't have to go through much of a process. So I want you to know that we are expediting that. We absolutely need your help. We need the federal help. You're a
You've got it.
builder.
I told you, you will have no permit problem. There will be 0 delay. And as far as I'm concerned, you already have the permits.
And
But
the resource.
I am more worried because I met at least 8 groups of homeowners, and
Yeah, so Donald Trump is not getting off on the best foot with some people, but can we really expect anything else from him? I mean, what are we feeling about this, guys?
Well, let me just make one point real quick, is that when these fires started in Los Angeles with Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and county officials, etc. It was during the Biden presidency, but you cannot ask for aid from FEMA until after the actual incident. And that is why we are having Donald Trump right in the middle of this situation.
Yes, good clarification. Well, some people think that it's not Newsom's fault that these fires broke out as much as they did. Some people think it do. Some people blame climate change. Some blamed him not putting enough water in the fire hydrants. There are many different critiques here.
There's arson investigations.
Arson investigation. There's many things going on here. But yeah, Trump and Newsom are old political males. They don't like each other. It's been made pretty obvious. As soon as Trump was elected, Newsom went out there and said, "We're going to Trump-proof California. I'm going to protect my citizens from his reign," whatever he said. But yes, he is very much anti-Trump, and Trump is very much anti-Newsom. Calls him Newscum even. But yeah,
so ring to it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
he's got some good nicknames.
He has very good nicknames.
The Sanctimonious
is the best one. But yes, Trump and Newsom are not going to get along. It's not going to. We have to accept it. Whoever new mayor of California, new governor of California is going to be. He's not going to get along with them either. It's always going to be like that.
But you know what the problem is? It doesn't matter if you don't get along. This is about the people. Like all these people, homes are gone. Their city is burned. It doesn't matter petty fights that you're going to have with each other. You don't get along. Put it aside. The reason you're here, the reason you're in politics, at the end of the day, is for the people.
Is it?
Well,
yeah, if only it were so simple. We're talking about Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump here.
I'm going to just leave it at that.
If only it were so simple.
Ideally, it's for the people. So we need to be that's the mindset that they need to coming into this. How can we help all these people that are out of homes, out of jobs, out of places to be?
Actually, let me point out one thing, too. It's Gavin Newsom, Donald Trump, and budget cuts with Karen Bass. That's another thing, too.
I'm interested to see how the federal government interacts with California in this, especially given Donald Trump's tendency to downplay the effects, and I'm saying downplay loosely, using that lightly, to downplay the effects of man-made climate change. So if we see more things like this in the next 4 years, more extreme weather patterns, I'm just curious to see how he's going to deal with that, because right now he's getting in a screaming match with LA's mayor.
He's talking about tanking FEMA. He's talking about leaving all disaster relief up to the states. And I know the federal grant blockage got blocked by a judge, but I'm curious to see how would the reaction to the fires or other natural disasters, what that would have looked like for a little bit without federal money coming in, because they need that money.
Yeah, it's that idea of big government and taking that down. For me personally, I'm not confident in that, because like you said, like there's so many people, even natural disasters aside, like there are so many people that rely on the federal government because
But should they be relying on it, though, is the question. Should they be that reliant on the federal government in the first place?
Because is the state government doing its job?
The government is supposed to help people that are...
But here's the thing, too, is the federal government actually responds to the states. One of the problems that they had all those years ago in New Orleans during Katrina was that FEMA came in and New Orleans said, "Thank you, FEMA, you're here. Let's get to work." However, they didn't have a plan. FEMA responds to local and state government. The local and state government does not respond to FEMA. And that is why I actually don't 100% disagree with the argument. I said my piece, everyone.
I didn't hear you agreeing with for a second.
Can you elaborate on that? I think,
sure. Yeah. What I'm saying is that basically after Katrina, the reason why the cleanup was such a mess, we saw law enforcement officers stealing TVs from Best Buy, etc., was because FEMA came in and New Orleans didn't have a plan. FEMA does not do the organization. They bring in the resources. That is something you will hear from a lot of law enforcement officers and first responders. FEMA is not a miracle worker. FEMA is funds and extra bodies for help. That is what FEMA is. It's also resources. It cooperates with volunteer organizations. But Los Angeles's lack of plan and Donald Trump's frustration with that is somewhat warranted.
I would agree with you there, but I would also like to point out that in that same vein, if the state itself cannot come together and create a good plan, how are they going to be able to create a budget? If they can't come up with a plan, then it's presumable that they wouldn't even be able to have the funds either. So we need that federal safety net, so that when inevitably they do come up with a plan, I would even argue to expand that and say they should be part of that planning process of disaster response relief and things like that. Because obviously, if the state's not able to get itself together, then...
Well,
so you're almost... Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, and maybe that's part of it. Because whenever you're, in the face of a disaster, it can probably be overwhelming to think, how are we going to fix all of this? So maybe that's the give and take of it all, of maybe states, like California, that are prone for wildfires, or southern states that are prone for flooding, that should be part of, let's have a disaster response plan. You can't exactly know what's going to happen, but maybe having some bare bones of, here's what we can do in the face of a crisis. So that way, when these funds come in and these resources come in, they have maybe a better way to move forward with it.
I
And
mean, these storms, these incidents are only going to get worse as climate change continues to become more and more serious. I mean, you got the tropical storms in North Carolina they're still struggling with. And we need, or people need that government assistance, that FEMA money to help them, to help bring back a sense of normalcy after their lives have been ripped apart by these disasters.
Well, the question needs to be asked there is if the government can do all this with a bunch of funding to FEMA, can they come up with a comprehensive and doable plan for climate change? Because they haven't done that. Everyone likes to complain about climate change,
They've
but no
tried, but
no
that's,
one,
that's why we
nobody
have
has
big,
offered
we
a
have
real
big
solution to
oil
that.
lobbyists. They've tried.
Maybe
Scientists
so.
have been trying.
But I've not seen
It's
a real
the same reason why
plan.
tobacco. It's the
also-
same reason why tobacco is still on the shelves.
Well, and the hard
there has
part,
been no continuity too
Every
with
4
staying in the
years.
Paris Agreement. It's
Well,
the same thing with the World Health
yeah.
Organization. We can go all the way back to Ronald Reagan with stuff like this. He pulls out, the Democrats come in, they pull back in. It's just been a messy.
well, that's
You
the
can't
problem.
come up with a plan when you're putting all this money in at one point and then just leaving that behind.
And I would
leaving.
also like to say you can't come up with a plan when there is a large faction of the population that doesn't even believe in the problem the plan is trying to solve in the first place.
Plus, every 4 to 8 years, someone new's coming in and changing the rules.
I mean,
How
we're
do you
being-
how do you make a long-term plan when you can't guarantee the person following you is going to follow that plan?
Well, my thing is this: the people who voted for Donald Trump twice, the people who voted for him fair and square. So the people of the United States obviously don't feel that climate change is as important of an issue as some other people do. So you have to respect and will the American people to a degree. Is what
well,
I'd
it's an
say too.
education problem.
Education is one thing, but I think that it's that the people
Education
are
is the thing.
education is one thing because I think that some education is not exactly accurate in some institutions, but some is good, some is bad. But yes,
You're right about that with Christopher Columbus. Keep going.
yeah, but no, I think that people voted for Trump for a reason. They wanted to prioritize other issues over climate change, and they just felt that climate change was not as important of an issue long term as, say, illegal immigration or the economy or not putting America first.
I would argue
Issues-
that that is the most long-term problem.
Well, let's put this climate change conversation, as much as I'm hesitant to, let's put it to rest because I want to get into one last thing. Jackson talked about how illegal immigration is more important to the American people. Let's look at an offshoot of that. Let's talk about Trump's challenge to birthright citizenship. I think that is so very interesting.
Deeply unconstitutional.
Oh, okay. This is a great,
I'll start with
great
that.
opening
It's,
statement. Why do you think that?
That's most people's answer.
Yeah.
It's unconstitutional.
And they've polled around already. Most people disapprove of this. I think it's 56 to 42% are against his move for birthright citizenship. Of course, it's going to get blocked. It'll probably go to the Supreme. It will go to the
Where's the other
Supreme Court. But for him to make moves like this that are just blatantly against our Constitution, like I've said before, is concerning. He's trying everything. He's trying to push the power of the executive to its absolute limit. We're seeing that right
He's
now.
taking reach for the moon and shoot for the moon and reach the stars to a whole new level. I want to talk about he made a comment, supposedly, saying that birthright citizenship was meant to target the children of enslaved African Americans and not illegal immigrants. My response to that is that the founding fathers didn't know what America was going to look like today. We can talk about
Same thing as right
illegal
to bear
immigration.
arms.
Exactly, because that was to protect American citizens from the British colonial army, not necessarily from, a
Well, it was
everyday
also to
cat
protect. It was
burglar.
also to protect from the American government from government tyranny, essentially from the police.
Exactly, but not
Yes.
from our average cat burglar. So I'm arguing that Trump's interpretation of that is a bit erroneous because at the same time, the Constitution, you have to interpret it to the letter of the law. If they're not talking about illegal aliens in the Constitution in terms of birthright citizenship, why even bring that conversation to the table? It's not Trump's job to interpret the Constitution either. That's the Supreme Court's
Correct.
job.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's a nuanced conversation. I mean, it's been the precedent for a long time that if you're born here, you're automatically given citizenship. However,
It's in the Constitution.
it's in the Constitution. Yes, it's been there for almost as long as the Second Amendment.
It's
But
enshrined.
it's enshrined. But yes, there can be amendments made to the Constitution. If he can somehow get the support to amend the Constitution in that sense, then it would be legally fine.
Do you know how to amend?
think
Do you
he'll
know
get
how
it?
to amend the
A
Constitution?
lot, 2/3 of a lot of stuff.
It's not gonna happen.
You need 2/3
So
of all
realistically, it's not
state.
going to happen.
You
But
need
the idea is there.
You need 2/3 of all state legislatures, and
Yes.
you need bipartisan, full 100% support from
You
both
also-
chambers.
So it's
then-
not going to happen. It's not
I
actually.
was
going to
going
happen.
to say, do you think it's
Again,
possible?
The fact
I
that
would
he's trying.
argue
And then the courts
intention.
could just step in whenever they want, because they always do.
I mean, they've
I would
already
argue
blocked
the intention's there. Intention means just as much. And I think it's a conversation that probably shouldn't have even been had in the first place. And the fact that it is something that we're talking about, again, seems unconstitutional. And I always like to bring it back to America was built on the back of immigrants. We would not have what we have without them. We would not be
Yes,
where we
yes, I
are
agree.
without them.
Yes. Now, J.D. Vance did make an interesting point in a recent interview. He said that America was not founded by immigrants; it was founded by settlers. So I think that there is
Semantics.
yes,
Semantics.
there is maybe semantics. I do think that the people who came.
J.D. Vance is a 1700s kind of guy. Honestly,
J.D. Vance is a very intelligent,
Wishes it was
well-spoken,
in the
old-fashioned guy.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that immigrants have played a huge role in the way America is now, and they're a very important part of our history, and they will continue to be. But yes, I think that the idea that America was founded on immigrants is a little bit flawed because America was not a nation when the European settlers first came here. It was more just kind of independent tribes and not an actual nation. So,
Right, but then who
on
were
immigration.
the people
over
that
time,
came?
Industrial
they're not
Revolution,
founded-
the-
they're not founded on immigration.
We can have a conversation about the difference between settlers and immigrants another day. Let's actually do that in the coming episode. But for now,
That's
that
a
is
history
all of the
panel.
time that we have today. Donald Trump has clearly started his new year with a bang. Many in the country are hopeful for the future. However, there are just as many who feel the opposite. But everyone is looking toward the White House, waiting to see how Trump will change the nation, and change it he will. Stick with us as we keep you informed on all things politics. That's all the time we have for today. We'll save you a seat at the desk. Back to you, Massimo.
Thanks, yeah. Quite the start to his second term in office. Sadly, that's all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay up to date with ATD on our socials at PSU at the desk, and let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Massimo Manfra, and we'll see you back at the desk.